Got my cologne. You know how that works. Just, I'm feeling good that night.
I spoon between these two Australian men who know each other.
She took it, and she looked at me, and she went in to give me a kiss, and I fucking bolted. I panicked. I don't know what the hell to do with that.
And like Leah pushing me against the brick pillar and going, "Who is it? Who's your girlfriend?" And I was like, "It's you, okay?"
Imagine if Scarface wasn't about a drug dealer, but it was about a surgeon. That was my dad, right? He'd be like, "Say hello to my little friend." Scalpel.
Night gowns. What do you call those? Whatever they are. Evening gowns, thank you. And they are gorgeous. And I am a super friendly guy.
And like, I barely like my tongue in my own mouth. Why do I want to put it in somebody else's mouth?
Sometimes they have a partner and the partner comes in and chops their head off. And that's what this breakup was like.
Our next storyteller is one of the people who, when I was going to give up StorySlam and end it, that very day he sent me a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, the week before my first StorySlam, I was diagnosed with cancer, and this was something that was sort of on my bucket list, and I crossed it off when I came and told that story, and it's just been really awesome and healing, and things are good, and blah, blah, blah." Do you like how I glossed over cancer? Blah, blah, blah. And he just said, what you do, you're actually the first person who ever sent me a message like that said, what you do is important, and I hope it keeps going. So you have him to thank for all this shit. We also have he and his wife to thank. I don't know if it was 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. But our biggest expense is rent here. We rent out the Wilmar Center, and they were very kind. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this in public or not, but they paid for half a year's rent for us, and then his business matches charitable donations. And since this is a nonprofit, what's that called? Business, whatever, nonprofit. There you go. You guys all said it. His business was able to match that. So we had a full year of StorySlam paid for, or at least our rent paid for, which was awesome. So we owe them a big thanks. And I didn't want to leave them out. And then also, Ben hooked us up with Dean Health Plan, who also did a huge favor. We used to do door prizes and or like raffle prizes, and then we used to give away a prize at the end of StorySlam. And Ben hooked us up with Dean Health Plan, who gave us $500 and said, "Hey, supply this, let this be your raffle prize every month." So big shout out to Dean Health Plan and Ben as well. Okay, yeah, go ahead and clap. Yeah. All right, our next storyteller is telling the very first story that I ever told at StorySlam. It's a story called Thedford, Nebraska. Please put your hands together for Bradley Glassel.
Yeah. Classic story, otherwise known as a rerun. So I grew up in Milwaukee, and at 19, I was working in a restaurant that wasn't going that great, and they fired me. And 2 weeks before that, I had bought a car, and my parents had co-signed for the car. So I came up with a brilliant plan while they were away on vacation. The next day, I hopped in the car, and I was going to drive to California to sell it there. Yeah. Brilliant, right? It's one of the series of brilliant plans I have come up with. So I drove to California, and 3 years later, I was still there. The car was gone, but I was still there. So I decided to go on vacation, and my next brilliant plan was to buy a Greyhound month-long pass. Has anybody ever traveled on Greyhound? It's fabulous luxury travel, isn't it, though? I always wonder, it's the chicken and the egg thing. Which came first, the armpit of the city or the Greyhound station? Exactly. So I backpacked across the United States from California back to Wisconsin and landed at my parents' house. So I landed there, and I was there for about 2 hours, and my friend from high school called and said, "Hey, I heard you're back in town. We're leaving tomorrow to go camping in Colorado. You want to go along?" Well, yeah, I visit with my parents for 2 hours. After 3 years gone, it's time to get out of here. So that night I repacked my backpack, didn't need everything to take along, reduced it all down. And the next day, Dan and Laura came and picked me up to go to Colorado. Now, the car that Dan picked me up in was a car that he rebuilt. Now, when I say rebuilt, he rebuilt it totally. He took the engine and stripped it down to nothing and rebuilt the whole car completely, top to bottom. But what he didn't have quite down was the electrical system. And when we got to Colorado, it completely shut down like nothing. We had to tow it into a shop, and a guy figured out how to fix it, and we got back on the road. So we camped in Colorado, had a great time. We're heading back from Colorado, and Dan had been driving for quite a while, and he says, "I think it's your turn to drive." I said, "Sounds good, I'll drive." "Well, we got a little town coming up here. Why don't we stop off in town, have a beer, and then you can take over?" And we're driving up upon Thedford, Nebraska. I think about population about 500. Think of your classic little town out in farming country, maybe, again, population of 500. We turn down Main Street, and there's a movie theater, and next to it is like a VFW post. And so we pull in there, go in and have a beer. Imagine walking into this place where it's bright lights, 6-foot-long tables, every guy in there has a baseball cap and bib overalls on. And it's one of these things when you walk in, and there's a lot of people there, but it goes dead silent, and they look at you. You feel really comfortable, So we go ahead and hang out in there and have a beer for a little bit, and we're like, I think we should just go ahead and leave. So I take my turn, hop in the car, we pull out Main Street, we take a right turn, the sun is setting behind us, we're driving east towards Wisconsin, and here comes the other direction is a police car. And it comes, and it goes past us, turns on its light, turns around, and comes up behind us. So now imagine 2 guys get out of the car, Barney Fife and Buford D. Justice. Okay, now I notice that's an old reference. There's a lot of young people who don't get that, but a lot of older people get it, so that's good enough for me. So Buford comes up to the car, and I roll down the window, and I say, "Good evening, officer. How may I help you?" No, I didn't say that at all. I said some wise thing. I was, being a wise guy. I'm 21 years old, and I'm a wise guy. And so I roll down the window and say, what do you want, or whatever. And Buford comes up to the window, and he says, "Son, you got a burned out headlight." Well, Dan jumps out of the passenger seat, runs over, and kicks the fender, and the light comes on. I'm like, "All right, we're out of here, right? We're all done." He says, "Son, let me see your driver's license." And I said, "Well, funny thing, I don't have my wallet with me. Not an unusual thing back. This is quite a while ago. You didn't really have credit cards as much and all that." And he says, "Well, I'll go back and check." So he comes back a couple minutes later, and he says, "I checked, and you do not." By the way, does anybody know what a Nebraska accent is? Good, because I have no fucking idea either. So I'm winging that. I don't have that in my memory. It says, "Son, in Nebraska, you need to have your driver's license with you." And I said, "Oh, okay." And he says, "That'll be a $35 fine, and you need to pay me in cash right now." Well, I'm like, I ain't going to give this guy $35. That's crazy. He's just going to pocket the money and take off. So my next brilliant plan is to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. He says, "What do you mean you're not going to do that?" I said, "I'm not going to pay you." He says, "Well, then you're going to go to jail." I said, "Okay, sounds good." He says, "Okay, we'll turn around. We're going to drive back into town, and I'm going to put you in jail." I said, "Okay. So he turns around, and I start driving back town, and Dan and Laura look at me and go, "What the fuck are you doing?" I said, it's no big deal. I've got a Greyhound pass. I'll spend a night in jail, and I'll see you guys in a day or two. Okay, yeah, right. Sounds good. So we follow them back into town. The cop car's ahead of us. He makes a left turn down Main Street, right in front of the movie theater. A little girl runs out in the street, and they hit the girl. Well, we're sitting there, and then they pull over to the side, and we're sitting in the middle of the street, and this girl's laying in the street, and all these people start pouring out of the movie theater. And they're all standing around looking at us, the guys who were just in the VFW post in this strange car from Wisconsin. And we're like, uh-oh, this does not look good. So Buford comes up to the car, and he says, "Son, I think you should get out of here." I said, "No problem. I'm ready to go." He says, "First, you're going to have to pay me." I said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So from the back seat, Laura goes, "Will you take a check?" So writes out the check, gives it to Buford. He turns to me and he says, "Son, the next time you're in Nebraska, bring your driver's license." And so we pull out of town, and head back to Wisconsin. Well, I lived in California for about 8 more years, and I decided to move back to Wisconsin. And my dad came and flew out to help me move back. And we drove back in a little pickup truck that I had with a trailer pulling behind it. And when we got to the Nebraska border, I told him the story. He looked at me and he said, "We won't be telling your mother that story." Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I think the first time that Brad told that, when he told the part about the little girl getting hit by a car, there was one sound after it, and it was me going, "Ha!" Because I'm an asshole.